Hello and what's up, political peeps? Per usual, I'm your host, Arav Kapoor. Today, I welcome you back to the GeoPolitical. I know it's been a long time. Today is Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. It's around 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 7 p.m. Central Time. And even though I haven't posted in a little while, I'm on today for a one-on-one segment, me and you. To talk about a big race we're looking at in the world of congressional politics in Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. This is formerly represented by Tennessee Representative Mark Green. He resigned earlier in July after he worked on the One Big Beautiful Bill with Speaker Johnson and the team, um, and he resigned to go work in the private sector. The seat in the 7th District was held by Senator Marsha Blackburn before she ran for the Senate. Mark Green came for the seat immediately subsequent to her resignation, and um, it's been a consistently Republican seat. In 2022, in 2024, when Republicans ran the seat, Donald Trump won it 60 to 38. That's the 22 points. Senator Blackburn also won it in terms of statewide races by about 22 points, and Mark Green also won it 21-22 points when he ran in the district in 2024, just about 13 months ago. Upon his resignation in July, the special election was called. There was a primary. The primary took place at the beginning of October. I think it was October 7th to be exact. And it was very interesting. So Republicans were much more united than the Democrats. They over 50%, it was like 53% of Republicans went ahead and voted in the primary for Matt Van Epps, who ended up being the Republican candidate, and he was endorsed by Donald Trump, the whole MAGA crew. He's a MAGA warrior, as they like to say, and he's committed to the whole GOP MAGA agenda. Um, he had much more support than the Democratic nominee, the eventual Democratic nominee, Afton Ben, who falls into this new Democratic Socialist AOC Mamdani wing of the Democratic Party, which um, I work with the Democrats here in my town of Fairfield, Connecticut. Um, at the local level, we haven't seen that kind of super far left insurgency coming into our Democratic Party, at least at the levels we've seen in New York City and now in Tennessee. But this lady, Afton Ben, who's a state representative in the Tennessee legislature, um, definitely falls in line. People have called her the AOC of Tennessee. Which, if you're thinking about a district where, like I mentioned before, a Republican, Mark Green, Marsha Blackburn, Donald Trump have won MAGA type people by 22 points, I don't know if the Democrats picking an AOC is the right play in a district like Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. And, you go around there, you're going to find mainly Republicans. It's a deep, deep red district, R plus 22. For a while, the Cook Political Report has considered that a safe Republican seat. Only recently has it switched over to a likely lean Republican seat. So what I was saying before, we haven't seen that kind of left insurgency here in Fairfield's Democratic Town Committee. It's happened at the state level. We have a Josh Elliott primarying Governor Ned Lamont, that old school Democrat. Ned Lamont, one of those old school Democrats. Eric Adams, moderate, old school Democrat. Even people like Congressman Jim Himes, my congressman from here in the 4th District, Southwestern Connecticut, more of that old school from the Obama era Democrat, back when politics was way less polarizing, when people worked together more. And now that inevitably it seems like this left insurgency is gonna come in everywhere from pretty blue Southwestern Connecticut, where I'm from, to deep red, or formerly deep red, um, Western Tennessee, which is honestly really unexpected. I guess we can now think about it as inevitable. If it can come to New York City and it can come to Connecticut, why can't it come to Tennessee? So Democratic town committees, Democratic voters, just be ready for that. You're going to get an AOC, and the thing about the left is that Democrats, like the ones um who are in Tennessee, even those Democrats in Tennessee, are totally different than New York Democrats. New York Democrats are more liberal. Ultimately, they're more liberal. That's just a fact, and are more likely to vote for a socialist candidate. That's how Mamdani ended up collecting the votes needed in their primary to ultimately be nominated by the Democratic Party, with a lot of other candidates in the pool that had a lot of prior political experience, like Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, who has so much political experience being the governor, but he's that old school moderate Democrat. And for the more liberal people in New York, that is definitely not that they wanted new ideas. And even though those ideas are going to be super hard to execute, and they're frankly not going to happen, or maybe they'll happen, but I don't think that it'll be a net benefit for the voters of New York, just because a lot of the things Mamdani's promising are like impossible to do with the city council. Anyway, I digress. They wanted change, and they got that change by electing a Democratic Socialist in New York. In Tennessee, even the Democrats are far less liberal. Afton Ben only got like 26% of the vote to be nominated in the Democratic primary. She does not have super broad support. So even Tennessee Democrats, who are going to be significantly more moderate, are probably going to be alienated by somebody like Afton Ben. That's why that's problematic for Democrats. If Democrats want to win in places like Tennessee, I understand that there's this left flank of the party always pushing them. It goes back to even what we talk about in the government shutdown, how people like AOC end up pushing people like Chuck Schumer to constantly fight Donald Trump. In a place like Tennessee, where people like Donald Trump won by 22 points in 2024, you can't build an entire congressional campaign, especially in a lower turnout special election like this one that's happening tonight, on the basis of hating Donald Trump when Donald Trump won by 22 points. If Democrats want a chance, they have to look beyond the Trump derangement syndrome. They have to accept that some of the stuff that Donald Trump has done has been right. Some of the stuff he's done has been wildly corrupt and not right. But you can't be so alienating to the base voter in a red district like the 7th Congressional District of Tennessee if you want to be appealing, if you want to win in a congressional district like the 7th Congressional District of Tennessee. Um, Afton Ben was arrested relating to kind of insurgency in Republican Speaker of the House's office at the Tennessee legislature. I believe the officers there were attempting to remove her. She resisted, so she was arrested. Later, charges were dropped. That's something controversial on her resume. Um, Additionally, she's been against police and stuff, and Republicans have also consistently attacked her for things like supporting taxpayer funded sex change surgery for minors. Also, some have cited that she's willing to propose that without parental consent. Um, if that's true, which it might be because of how liberal Afton Ben is, she is a Democratic Socialist. She was endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. Um, it's likely true, and it's likely these far left pieces that she's going to try to propose if she ends up in Washington as a congressman. Um, because of that, the people in Tennessee who even are Democrats, the 74% of Democrats in Tennessee who voted in that primary election, they're going to have the option. Do I want to go with this socialist who was endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, who won't have my values, or would I rather go conservative because most of my family and friends are conservative? So there's going to be the staunch Democrats who, even if they're a moderate, and I would never vote for a Republican, which in my political work I've seen there's Democrats who will never vote for a Republican no matter who the Democrat is. There's some will vote. Some of that they'll vote for that Democrat, whether they're moderate or if they're super far left Democratic Socialist. But then there's the Democrats who are surrounded by mostly Republicans in a district like the 7th Congressional District of Tennessee, and they're going to realize this is a super far left person, and it lines this man, Matt Van Epps, the Republican nominee, the MAGA guy, aligns more with the people around me, I'm not going to go and vote for the socialist. I would rather have a MAGA guy who is continuing and maintaining the agenda of the people around me. Now, there's other argument. There's been a lot of controversial things Donald Trump has done, and we saw Donald Trump is good at rallying support when he's not in office because he can say that he's going to do a lot of things. Um, but midterms have never been Donald Trump's thing. Special elections never his thing. In 2018, his first midterm, he lost like 40 seats in the House. So mid-cycle elections, they've given the MAGA Republicans a run for their money. Um, Even in this super red district, or what we always consider to be a super red district, yesterday, Monday, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, was in Tennessee roaming around with Matt Van Epps. Cool clip. He had his phone on speakerphone, put the mic to it at a rally with thousands of people there, live Fox News televising it, and had Donald Trump speak at the rally. This is House Speaker, GOP House Speaker Mike Johnson. So Republicans are clearly scared that they're going to lose because polling at this point is showing 52 to Matt Van Epps and like 48 for Afton Ben, the Democratic nominee, again, endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America from that AOC wing. So I am not sure, and I don't think we will be sure until much after the election, why people are coming out in support in a super red congressional district like this one, um, for a socialist like Afton Ben. But we have to think about a lot of the stuff Donald Trump has done. Um, there's a lot of a lot of talk about it, and a lot of people, um, particularly on the left, will will go ahead and they'll say, whether it's right or not, Donald Trump is a bad person, and they call him names, and they call him names, and they will incessantly bash him and call him a fascist and feed this political drama. And at this point, that's what the Democrats are living on. They're living on the hate of Donald Trump, and this goes back to the original, what I mentioned before, the what they call Trump derangement syndrome. People don't like Donald Trump, but maybe it'll bring them closer in polling. But particularly, like I said before, in a place like Tennessee 7th congressional district, you're not going to win on a campaign based solely on hating the person who just won by 22% 13 months ago. No matter how much Donald Trump might not live up to expectations, or how much people might hate on the Epstein files issue, or whatever it may be, or the increasingly divided GOP with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene making headlines, and the tariffs and stuff. Trump's made progress. We have to admit that. There's been progress made, and entirely hating every single thing that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is not gonna help somebody win this campaign. I think the 74% of Democrats who didn't vote for Afton Bade, a large majority of them are going to defect to a Republican candidate like Matt Van Epps, or they're not going to vote. Because remember, it's not a big election. It's not a general election. It's not a presidential election. So those kind of Democrats might not show up to vote if the Democrats have somebody endorsed like Afton Bain. Really, the ideal play for Democrats, if they really wanted the seat in Congress, would be to elect a old school, moderate style Democrat, the only person who would have any kind of chance in a deep red plus 22 Republican district like Mark Green's. Hakeem Jeffries was talking about this too. He said that Democrats were giving Republicans a run for their money, and I think they are. I think Republicans are nervous because of what we saw in New York City with Zohan, and with Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, and Abigail Spanbanger in Virginia. And Democrats mainly failed in 2024 in terms of messaging, and they've locked in on messaging. They've locked in people like Zohan Mamdani, young, charismatic, speak multiple languages, Afton Ben all over social media. So yeah, they're catching up on what Republicans did right in 2024, and that's why Republicans are leaning in. That's why they sent Mike Johnson, and Mike Johnson's a busy man. That's why they sent Mike Johnson to spend an entire day campaigning in, like I said, this deep red or formerly deep red district. They are scared, also mainly because with a 220 to 215 majority, assuming the seat stays Republican, and then you have the normal characters like Thomas Massey and the Freedom Caucus people who don't vote. If we have a set amount of time, right, as Republicans, where you can pass legislation. Of course, Donald Trump's presidency is limited to 4 years, and this Congress is limited to only 12 or 13 more months. And in terms of passing budgets and stuff, the majority is something that's very important, very slim right now. And it again goes back and shows how polarizing our political climate right now is as a country, and how these races are so crucial. I believe like almost $3.5 million Republicans have spent on this race because it's a big one that they really want to make sure they win. Um, because also, if a Democrat wins now, it's likely that with the incumbency, they'll win in the November 26th midterm election, and that's very very close race on the House side. Um, and if that race, if the Democrats gain the majority in the House in 2026 in the 120th Congress, I can guarantee to you it's going to be some kind of impeachment every single day on Donald Trump, because this new leftist movement, and I think a lot of the Democratic House seats in 2026 are going to be filled with these socialist type people. Not particularly in places like Tennessee, but in places like California and places like New York. So Democrats in places like Tennessee, I'll wrap up now, got to be cognizant about running far leftist socialists on the ballot because it ain't going to work. Republicans, Democrats are coming after you in terms of messaging. They're telling people some stuff lies, some stuff truth about Donald Trump and Mike Johnson and Needle Thune and the DC crew, and some stuff is lies, some stuff is true. About both of these candidates, but it's important to understand the Republicans have to keep up with the messaging, and ultimately they also have to look beyond, especially at the federal level, go back to what they ran on. The basic stuff they ran on, it was really appealing. The different things that they ran on that were unlike the status quo for such a prominent federal politician. Stuff like releasing the Epstein files was something that was so important to so many of the Donald Trump based voters. And even though, yes, James Comer's oversight subpoenas covered most of what was in those Epstein files, and there wasn't much found in. They let with the discharge petition fight on HR 4405 in the House. They let it become a media talking point for Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats and the Thomas Masseys who are not helping the Republicans. So Republicans, they have to stay on the ball, stay laser focused on exactly what they campaigned on because that worked. And if they want any chance at winning in 2026 and 2028 and beyond, they need to stay laser focused on what they campaigned on. And they campaigned on a very specific domestic agenda, just like Zohran Mamdani ran on very specific affordability based domestic agenda that put America first. In Zohan's case, he put New York City first. And if Republicans stick with that agenda, they have a good chance. If they don't digress and start focusing on other things globally. Of course, ending wars globally is very, very important, given how much of a global figure the United States is as a nation. But focusing on the key America First things that make not status quo people, whether they be Donald Trump on the right or Zohan Mamdani on the left, focusing on this not normal politician behavior is clearly what works. And of course, Matt Van Apps is MAGA, so he's not an old school Republican. But also Afton Ben is a Democrat, right? I think in 2022, after the election, Republicans saw that MAGA wave come, and MAGA is now what works. For Republicans, Democrats, now that they lost the 2024 election, just like Republicans lost in 2020, now that they lost the 2024 election, Democrats going through the same thing, and their MAGA is the far left socialists. Um, and that works in certain places. And but a place like Deep Red, Mark Green, Tennessee, it ain't work. So Democrats should still keep their moderatism um, to them, because things like transgender surgeries, that kind of thing, it ain't gonna work in a place like Western Tennessee. So it's very interesting, and it goes back to a conversation about the Democratic Party and its trajectory at the national level, which, of course, we'll be talking about much more with politicians and candidates on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity to just sit down with you guys, talk about this. Very excited to see these election results. We'll have to watch, and I think it's likely Matt Van Epps will win, because the Democrats could win because of their messaging and what they've been able to do to convince people that what Donald Trump is doing is wrong. They could, but then running their entire campaign on how Donald Trump is wrong and putting a socialist like Afton Ben, maybe a California congressional district, or a New York or Long Island congressional district. They're not going to flip a Tennessee congressional district solely on how Donald Trump is bad. Um, that's all I got for you today. Really excited to have been able to share this news. Be watching the election results. Um, Political peeps, you guys know the drill. Lots of interviews coming up. Fairfield local election coverage, February 3rd, special election coming up. You all know the drill. Peace out, political peeps. I'm your host, Arav Kapoor. Keep watching the election. Peace out.